Hi, and welcome to Gagne's 9 Significant Events Model. This is Dr. Steve from Misericordia University. This video represents part of the instruction for our graduate course in Principles in Instructional Design. Robert Gagne prepared a model of 9 significant events that take place during effective instruction. I'm going to divide the 9 events into 3 groupings of events. The first grouping represents preparation for learning. The first step is to gain the attention of the learners. If you don't gain the focus of the learners, no learning can take place. Beyond drawing the attention of learners, it is important to interest learners in the topic being studied. Gagne says to repeat this step as often as necessary during instruction. The second step is to inform the learner of the objectives. The learner must know in the form of an advanced organizer what will be learned. We know today from brain research that this is a significant event to prepare for learning to take place. Step 3 is to help the learner recall prerequisite information. In a constructivist way, let's help the learners recall what they already know so they can then evaluate information already contained in their existing schema to determine what information needs to be discarded, what was not properly learned in the past, what information already learned represents a fuzzy understanding of the content, and then they can decide how new information fits into their understanding. So linking previous information to new learning is very significant. So again, these first 3 events deal with the preparation for learning.
Gagne's events 4 through 7 are the actual direct instructional process. Step 4 is present the information, and that's when we teach. Step 5 is when we provide guidance. So after we instruct and present some new information, we now will provide an example or two, and we could do that through examples, non-examples, and a host of other ways. But we provide a little more guidance. So the students now start seeing how to apply the material. Step 6, Gagne says, let's immediately elicit some type of performance. In other words, let's ask the student to do something to exercise this learning. Now in class, it takes certain forms. In instructional design for computer-based training, of course, we have to take other forms for that. Step 7 says, obviously after we ask students to do something, we give them feedback. We show them what's right, what they did wrong, and why. When you look at all of these events, we don't necessarily have to, in any type of lesson, just do one set of these events. Gagne's model is iterative. In other words, we can start off and do one little bit of information and do steps 4 through 7, gain attention again, and then do another set of 4 through 7. In other words, break events, instructional pieces down into smaller chunks of information to be learned. Steps 8 and 9 in Gagne's model deal with finishing the instruction. We will assess performance, in other words, test the students and make sure that they have learned something and that we can measure that. And step 9 is when we want to help students connect this learning with future learning. In other words, where does this fit in? So that we help students prepare to transfer this new information, this new knowledge, so that they do not isolate it and think, okay, that's really interesting that we learned this particular math piece, for example, but okay, I've learned it and now I'm done. We show them how they can now transfer, or at least set the stage for them to start transferring it. And we could do this by saying, you'll recall in the beginning of the lesson we talked about, here's where you were, here's what we now learned today, here's where we're going in the future in this particular class, or in future modules if it's computer-based training. On the next few screens, I have listed some ways to address the 9 significant events model in instruction. So here we're starting with gain attention. About gain attention, realize that we can gain attention both in a more tangible way, like hey, we're ready to get started now, that type of thing, a pure attention getter. We can also try to intellectually stimulate the learner into the material, so we can try to gain attention with some information that's going to draw them into this material rather than clapping our hands, turning off the lights in a classroom, walking to a podium or lectern. And then I also deal here with several ideas about informing how we're going to inform the learner of the objectives. Here are several ideas about helping learners recall their prerequisites. We can review vocabulary. Somehow we have to relate what they know already with, prepare them to move forward in learning this new material. In step 4, of course, we're dealing with presenting instruction, and here are a couple of thoughts. Don't forget the magic number of 7 plus or minus 2. In the computer world and multimedia world, we're able to use examples, illustrations, non-examples with supplementary materials like links to other things, academic games, interesting and stimulating websites, just to name a few. In step 5, when Gagne refers to providing guidance to our students, here we can illustrate, we can provide examples, we can provide non-examples, we can try to provide an example where the situation could be a little fuzzy. Well, it could go this way, it could go that way, and we help the students see what those fuzzy little situations are and help clear up their fuzzy understanding of the material. Notice that as we progress through Gagne's model, little by little, the instructor, the onus of the burden of instructing leaves the instructor, and more goes on to the learner. So we're slowly weaning the learner off of us, and more they're doing something, until finally, in the final 2 steps, they're taking a test, and then they're an assessment, and then they're moving forward, ready to transfer that knowledge into other situations. In step 6, here are some ideas about how to elicit performance from our students. Remember that embedded questions, here we're talking about embedding questions within this particular lesson, and we're going to talk about that in person. We're not going to grade these embedded questions. Instead, we're going to provide feedback to students so that they can learn from their responses. If they did not get something correct, why didn't they get it correct? Where is the flaw in this learning? Let's get them to a higher level of understanding. Maybe we'll give them an opportunity to go back and review the material again, if need be. But we will not grade these embedded questions. So elicit performance can be questions. It can also be opportunities for students simply to drill and practice, or even a game where they can practice and reinforce that material. In step 7, we're giving feedback. In step 8, we're talking about assessment. So here we can provide a quiz or a summative test. If it's computer-based, we could certainly have it in a computer-based form. We could also provide questions if we're doing something in our classroom, and then we could have students, after they complete our module of training, they can now write something down and then submit it to the instructor when they're completed with that activity. The final step in Gagne's model is to enhance retention and transfer. This is probably the most nebulous of all of his steps and maybe the least understood. Here are several ideas to reinforce what this means and how we can actually apply this in our own instructional practice.
As you can see, Robert Gagne has really set a standard for instructional design. His model is appropriate for instructor-led teaching and training, as well as appropriate for synchronous and asynchronous online learning. If you're like me, Gagne's model, along with other models of instructional design, can really challenge the way you teach and how you view the design of instruction, whether for the traditional classroom or for online learning. In our next video, we will examine Gagne's model further, and we'll consider how to apply the steps of his model into the design of learning. Thanks for watching, and see you on our next video.